A small hand clamped Isaiah Booker's boot before he could dismount. Leather creaked under the child's grip while the rodeo crowd roared behind him. Dust hung thick in the arena lights, gold crown still heavy in Isaiah's hands. The boy's fingers trembled but refused to release the spur leather. "Don't ride away again, Mr. Booker." Isaiah looked down and saw Sheriff Walter Briggs pushing through the cheering men. Briggs carried a folded paper that could quiet any town. "Boy, tell them whose son you really are." A small hand clamped Isaiah Booker's boot before he could swing down from the saddle. Leather creaked under the grip. Dust rolled across the rodeo arena while the crowd roared for the new champion. The silver crown still rested in Isaiah's hand. Heavy. Cold. Not worth much to a man who had ridden too many lonely miles. The boy's fingers tightened against the spur leather. Thin fingers. Shaking fingers. But stubborn. "Don't ride away again, Mr. Booker." Isaiah looked down slowly. The boy could not have been older than 8. Dust in his curls. Sunburned cheeks. Eyes dark and steady like someone who had already lost too much. Behind them the grandstand boards rattled with applause. Boots stomped. Men shouted his name. Booker. Best ride the county's seen in 10 years. Isaiah did not turn. The boy's hand still gripped his boot. Sheriff Walter Briggs pushed through the men gathering near the arena gate. Leather badges jingled softly on his vest. The sheriff's face looked tight. Not proud. Not smiling. He carried a folded paper. Creased deep like it had been opened too many times. "Isaiah," Briggs said quietly. The cheering crowd kept shouting behind him. "Boy here's been asking for you all morning." The boy looked up again. "Mama said you'd come back someday." Isaiah felt the words settle heavy in his chest. "Mama's name?" he asked. The boy swallowed. "Mary Carter." The name landed like a stone dropped in cold water. Isaiah did not move. He knew that name. Knew the river road where she used to wait every summer evening. Knew the night 15 years ago when he rode away instead of staying. Sheriff Briggs shifted the folded paper in his hand. Wind rattled it softly. "You might want to read this," the sheriff said. Isaiah did not reach for it. He looked at the boy instead. The child still held his boot. Still refused to let go. The rodeo band struck up a loud trumpet tune behind them. Bright. Celebrating. Wrong. Isaiah swung down from the saddle. His boots struck the dirt with a dull thump. The boy finally loosened his grip but stayed close. Too close for a stranger. Too certain. "Got somewhere to sleep tonight?" Isaiah asked. The boy shook his head. Wind pushed arena dust across the emptying stands. Men laughed. Coins clanked. The rodeo was already moving on to the next ride. Isaiah looked down at the crown in his hand. Then at the boy. He sighed once. Low. Tired. "Come on." They rode out of town in the last red light of evening. The saddle leather creaked with each step of the horse. The boy sat silent behind him. Small hands gripping the back of Isaiah's coat. The ranch house waited dark on the prairie when they arrived. Loose shutters knocked softly in the wind. Knock. Pause. Knock. Isaiah pushed the door open. The hinges groaned. Dust hung in the quiet rooms. He stepped aside and nodded once. The boy crossed the threshold. And the empty house finally held two sets of footsteps. The ranch house held the night like a cold cup. Isaiah Booker struck a match against the stove. Scratch. A thin flame jumped. The lantern wick caught slowly. Soft yellow light spread across the small kitchen table. The boy stood near the door. Boots dusty. Hands still clinging to the edge of Isaiah's coat. Wind tapped the loose shutter outside. Tap. Pause. Tap. Isaiah set the lantern down. The metal base clicked against the wood. Hungry? The boy nodded once. Isaiah opened a cupboard. The hinge groaned. Inside sat a loaf of hard bread and a tin of beans. He poured the beans into a pan. The stove lid clanged as he set it down. Soon the small kitchen filled with the low hiss of warming food. Warmth crept slowly across the room. The boy stepped closer to the stove. His hands hovered near the heat. Not touching. Just feeling. "What's your name?" Isaiah asked. "Samuel." The beans began to bubble. Soft. Steady. Isaiah set 2 bowls on the table. Ceramic knocked softly together. Samuel climbed onto the chair across from him. The boy ate fast at first. Then slower. Like someone remembering he did not have to hurry. The spoon tapped the bowl between bites. Isaiah watched the stove flame dance. "You said your mama told you to find me." Samuel nodded again. "She said you'd help." The stove popped once. Isaiah did not answer. Outside the wind rolled across the prairie grass. Long whispering waves. He pushed the second piece of bread across the table. Samuel took it carefully. "Thank you, Mr. Booker." Isaiah leaned back in the chair. Wood creaked under his weight. "Just Isaiah." The boy studied the room. Empty chairs. Dust on the shelves. A quiet house that had forgotten voices. "Do you live here alone?" Isaiah nodded. Samuel looked toward the hallway. Dark. Still. "House sounds lonely." Isaiah said nothing. The lantern flame flickered. A small sound broke the quiet. Clink. Metal against wood. Samuel reached into his pocket. He set something on the table. A small iron locket. The hinge bent slightly. It tapped the table again as the boy turned it. Clink. Isaiah felt his chest tighten. He knew that locket. He had watched Mary Carter wear it every summer evening beside the river. "Where did you get that?" Isaiah asked quietly. Samuel opened the locket. Inside rested a faded photograph. 2 young riders standing beside a riverbank. One of them was Isaiah. The other was Caleb Turner. "Mama kept it," Samuel said. The stove hissed louder. Isaiah stared at the picture. 15 summers folded inside the tiny frame. "Your mama ever tell you about Caleb Turner?" Samuel shook his head slowly. "She only said you were the man to find." Isaiah closed the locket. The hinge clicked softly. Outside, a distant horse whinnied somewhere across the prairie. Then another sound. Faint. Hoofbeats far down the road. Isaiah stood slowly. Chair legs scraped the floor. Samuel looked up. "What is it?" Isaiah walked to the window. The glass rattled lightly in the wind. He pushed the curtain aside. The road beyond the gate stretched empty under moonlight. But dust moved on the horizon. Far off. A rider traveling late. Isaiah let the curtain fall. "Nothing," he said. But the house felt colder again. Samuel watched him carefully. Like a boy used to reading silence. "People coming for me?" Isaiah did not answer. He picked up the bowls and carried them to the basin. Water splashed softly as he rinsed them. The quiet returned. Only the wind outside. Only the stove's gentle crackle. After a moment, Isaiah grabbed a folded blanket from the hallway chest. The fabric rustled as he shook it open. "You'll sleep in the spare room." Samuel followed him down the hallway. Floorboards creaked under their steps. The room at the end held a small bed. Dust floated in the lantern light. Isaiah set the blanket down. Samuel touched the wooden bed frame. "Been empty a long time?" Isaiah nodded. "Yeah." The boy climbed onto the mattress. The spring squeaked softly. He pulled the blanket to his chin. Warm. Safe. For the first time since arriving, Samuel's shoulders relaxed. Isaiah turned toward the door. "Mr. Isaiah?" He stopped. "Yes." Samuel held up the locket again. The metal glinted in lantern light. "Mama said this would help you remember." Isaiah stared at it. He already remembered. Too clearly. The river. Mary's quiet voice. Caleb Turner laughing beside the horses. And the night Isaiah rode away before the trouble came. He closed the bedroom door halfway. The hinge whispered, "Get some sleep, Samuel." The boy nodded. Isaiah walked back to the kitchen. The lantern still glowed on the table. Warm light filling a house that had stayed dark too many years. He sat slowly. The chair creaked. Outside the wind shifted. And somewhere down the prairie road, distant hoofbeats echoed once more. Closer this time. Cold morning air crept through the ranch house before sunrise. Wind slid under the door. Thin. Sharp. Isaiah Booker pushed open the stove lid. Iron clanged softly. A match scratched against the box. Scratch. The flame caught the wood slowly. Orange light spread across the kitchen walls. Warmth began its slow work. From the hallway came the soft creak of a floorboard. Samuel stood in the doorway. Hair tangled. Blankets still wrapped around his shoulders. He listened to the crackle of the stove like it was something rare. "Morning," Isaiah said. Samuel nodded. The boy stepped closer to the fire. Cold hands hovering near the heat again. Outside the wind hissed across the prairie grass. Long whispering waves. Isaiah poured oats into a pot. Water splashed. Soon the small room filled with the quiet bubbling of breakfast. Samuel watched everything. The slow movements. The careful silence. "You wake up early," the boy said. "Ranch work doesn't wait." Samuel pulled out a chair. Wood scraped the floor. He sat carefully. Like he was unsure he belonged there yet. Isaiah set a bowl in front of him. Steam curled upward. Warm. Samuel leaned over it. Breathing the heat. "Smells good." They ate in quiet. The spoon tapped the bowl. Small steady sounds. Outside a crow cawed across the pasture. Samuel glanced toward the window. "Do you have horses?" Isaiah nodded. "Two." Samuel's eyes brightened. "I can help." Isaiah studied the boy. Thin arms. Small shoulders. But steady eyes. "We'll see." The bowls emptied. Isaiah stood and grabbed his coat. Leather rustled. Samuel followed him to the door. Cold air rushed inside as it opened. The prairie stretched white and pale under morning light. Frost clung to the fence rails. Their boots crunched over frozen dirt. Crunch. Crunch. The barn door groaned when Isaiah pulled it open. Inside, warm animal breath filled the dim space. A horse stamped its hoof. Thump. Samuel stepped forward slowly. His hand reached toward the nearest horse. The animal snorted softly. Warm air against his fingers. "Her name's Daisy," Isaiah said. Samuel smiled. The first real smile Isaiah had seen. He stroked the horse's neck carefully. "You're a good girl." The horse shifted closer. Isaiah watched quietly. The barn filled with small sounds. Hooves shifting. Hay rustling. A peaceful noise. Something this ranch had not heard in years. Samuel picked up a brush from the stall wall. "Like this?" He began brushing Daisy's coat. Slow strokes. Dust rising in golden morning light. Isaiah leaned against the stall post. For a moment the ranch felt different. Warmer. Less empty. Then the sound came. Faint. Distant. Hoofbeats across the prairie. Samuel stopped brushing. "You hear that?" Isaiah listened. The wind carried the rhythm again. Far away. But steady. He walked to the barn door and looked toward the road. Nothing yet. Just open land. But dust stirred on the far ridge. A rider. Samuel stepped beside him. Someone coming? Maybe just passing through. Isaiah said it calmly. But he watched the ridge longer than needed. The hoofbeats faded. Silence returned. Samuel went back to brushing. But slower now. Careful. The barn settled again into quiet warmth. Hay rustled. Daisy snorted softly. After a while Samuel spoke. Mama liked horses. Isaiah glanced at him. She ever ride? Samuel nodded. Once she showed me the river road. Brush strokes slowed. She said you used to ride there. Isaiah felt the old memory stir. The river. Evening light on water. Mary Carter standing beside the cottonwoods. He turned away and grabbed a saddle blanket. Dust puffed from it. That was a long time ago. Samuel looked at the ground. Mama said some things shouldn't stay buried forever. The barn went quiet again. Too quiet. Isaiah carried the saddle outside. Leather creaked as he set it on the rail. Samuel followed him. The frost had melted now. Sunlight warmed the pasture. Birds chirped in the tall grass. A softer morning. Samuel ran his fingers across the saddle horn. You rode in rodeos a lot? Used to. Were you the best? Isaiah shrugged. Sometimes. Samuel grinned. I saw you yesterday. The boy climbed onto the fence rail. Boot heels tapping wood. You rode like the wind was pushing you. Isaiah tightened the saddle strap. Leather pulled hard. Wind pushes everyone eventually. Samuel grew quiet. After a moment he reached into his coat pocket. The iron locket appeared again. It swung gently from its chain. Clink. Samuel opened it. The photograph caught the sunlight. Two riders. Young. Laughing beside the river. That's you, Samuel said. Isaiah nodded once. And him? Samuel tapped the second rider. Caleb Turner. Isaiah stared at the image. 15 years folded into a small square of paper. He was a friend. Samuel closed the locket. Click. Mama said he was brave. Isaiah looked across the pasture. Wind rippled through the grass. He was. Samuel watched him carefully. Mama also said he never came back from the river road. Isaiah said nothing. The saddle strap tightened under his hands. Leather groaned. Silence spread between them again. Then the sound returned. Hoofbeats. Closer now. Not one rider. Two. Maybe three. Dust rose clearly on the road beyond the gate. Samuel slid off the fence rail. Are they coming here? Isaiah placed the saddle onto Daisy's back. Leather thumped into place. His eyes stayed on the road. Yes. The riders were still distant, but moving straight toward the ranch. Samuel gripped the fence rail. The locket tapped softly against his coat. Clink. Clink. Isaiah adjusted the saddle strap. Slow. Steady. The peaceful morning had ended. And someone was finally coming to ask questions. Dust rose slowly on the road beyond the ranch gate. 3 riders. Their horses moved at an easy pace. Not rushing. Not hiding. Isaiah Booker stood beside Daisy with one hand resting on the saddle horn. Samuel watched from the fence rail. The wind pushed through the prairie grass. A long whisper rolling across the land. Hoofbeats grew louder. Thump. 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 The riders slowed when they reached the gate. Sheriff Walter Briggs sat in the lead saddle. His hat brim cast a shadow over tired eyes. 2 town deputies waited behind him. Briggs pushed the gate open. The hinge squealed. Samuel slid down from the fence. Boots hit the dirt softly. Isaiah stepped forward. The sheriff dismounted slowly. Leather creaked as he landed. Morning silence settled over the yard. You came early, Isaiah said. Briggs nodded. Figured it best. Samuel stood behind Isaiah's shoulder. Small. Still. The sheriff glanced toward the boy. Then back to Isaiah. Town's talking already. Isaiah said nothing. The barn door shifted in the wind. Creak. Creak. Briggs pulled something from inside his coat. The same folded paper. Edges worn thin. "I didn't bring this yesterday to start trouble," he said quietly. Samuel's fingers tightened around the locket in his coat pocket. Clink. Metal touched metal. Isaiah heard it. The sheriff heard it too. Briggs lowered his voice. "Boy's name is Samuel Carter, correct?" Samuel stepped forward a little. "Yes, sir." Briggs studied the child's face. "Long. Careful. You know a man named Caleb Turner?" Samuel shook his head. "No, sir." Briggs sighed through his nose. The wind tugged his coat. "That's the problem." Isaiah crossed his arms. "Say what you came to say." The sheriff unfolded the paper. The parchment crackled in the quiet yard. A legal seal stamped in faded red wax. Samuel leaned closer. "What is it?" Briggs looked at Isaiah before answering. "Something your mama wanted kept safe." The boy's brow furrowed. Isaiah felt a slow heaviness settle in his chest. "Mary Carter came to town 2 months ago," Briggs said. "Quiet like she always was." Samuel's eyes widened. "You saw her?" The sheriff nodded once. "She was sick." Wind swept across the yard again. Cold. Sharp. Samuel stared at the ground. Isaiah remained still. "What did she want?" he asked. Briggs tapped the paper. "She wanted me to hold this until the right moment." Samuel stepped closer now. The locket chain slipped from his coat. Clink. It tapped the buckle of Isaiah's saddle. Briggs noticed the locket. His eyes narrowed slightly. "She give you that too?" Samuel nodded. "It was hers." The sheriff folded the paper again. "Slow. Careful. I ain't opening this today." Isaiah frowned. "Why not?" Briggs looked toward the distant road. Dust hung faint in the air far beyond the prairie ridge. Another rider somewhere out there. Moving. Watching. "Because there are people in this county who would rather that paper stayed buried," Briggs said. Samuel's small hand reached for Isaiah's sleeve. The boy's voice dropped. "People like who?" The sheriff's jaw tightened. "Victor Hale." The name landed heavy in the quiet yard. Samuel glanced between the men. "Who's that?" Isaiah's voice came low. "A rancher." Briggs shook his head slowly. "More than that." The sheriff walked a few steps toward the gate. His boots scraped the gravel. "That man owns half the valley. And he's been asking questions about Mary Carter." Samuel's fingers tightened again. The locket clicked against the saddle. Clink. Clink. Isaiah watched the sheriff carefully. "What kind of questions?" Briggs looked back at him. "The kind men ask when they want something to disappear." Silence settled. The barn horses shifted inside. Hooves thumped softly on wood. Samuel swallowed. "Why would he care about my mama?" The sheriff hesitated. Wind rustled the dry grass again. "Long. Uneasy. He's been looking for proof of something," Briggs said quietly. Isaiah felt the old weight of the past pulling closer. "What proof?" Briggs glanced at the folded paper in his hand. Then at the locket swinging gently from Samuel's coat. "Proof tied to Caleb Turner." Samuel's eyes widened. "That man in the picture?" Isaiah nodded once. "Yes." The sheriff stepped toward his horse. Leather reins jingled softly. "I'm telling you both this now because the quiet days are ending." Samuel looked up. Fear flickered behind the boy's steady eyes. "What happens next?" Briggs mounted his horse. Saddle leather groaned. He looked down at Isaiah. "You keep the boy close. And you don't ride into town unless you have to." Samuel stepped forward quickly. "What about the paper?" Briggs slid it back into his coat. "For now it stays with me." Wind moved across the yard again. cold against their faces. "But when the time comes," Briggs said, "this town is going to hear the truth." He turned his horse toward the gate. The deputies followed. Hoofbeats started again. Slow. Heavy. Samuel watched them ride away down the prairie road. The dust slowly faded behind them. Silence returned. Only the wind. Only the quiet ranch. Samuel looked up at Isaiah. "Mr. Isaiah?" "Yes." The boy held up the locket. The metal glinted in the afternoon sun. "Mama said Caleb Turner mattered." Isaiah looked toward the distant road. The place where the sheriff had vanished. "Yeah," he said softly. "He did." Samuel hesitated. "Did something bad happen to him?" Isaiah rested a hand on the saddle horn. Leather creaked under his grip. Something unfinished happened. The wind rattled the barn door again. Creak. Creak. And far beyond the prairie hills, another rider watched the ranch. Night settled slowly over the ranch. Cold air crept across the prairie grass. The barn lantern glowed faint through the slats. Inside the house the stove crackled steady. Isaiah Booker sat at the kitchen table. Samuel slipped down the hallway. The boy's door half open. Soft breathing drifting through the quiet house. Outside the wind pressed against the shutters. Tap. Pause. Tap. Isaiah leaned back in the chair. Wood creaked beneath him. His eyes rested on the locket lying on the table. Samuel had left it there after supper. The metal caught the lantern light. Small. Heavy. The hinge crooked from years of use. Isaiah picked it up. Clink. The sound echoed in the quiet kitchen. He opened it slowly. The photograph stared back. Two young riders beside the river. Himself. And Caleb Turner. Caleb laughing. A man who believed the world could still turn right if someone was brave enough. Isaiah closed the locket. Click. The wind shifted outside. Hoofbeats broke the night. Distant. Slow. Isaiah froze. The sound rolled across the prairie road. Thump. 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 A single rider this time. Not the sheriff. Too late for a friendly visit. Isaiah stood. Chair legs scraped the floor. He moved to the window. The glass rattled softly. He pushed the curtain aside. Moonlight spread across the pasture. A rider waited beyond the gate. Tall. Still. Horse-breathing clouds of pale vapor in the cold. Isaiah opened the door. The hinge groaned. Cold wind rushed inside. Samuel stirred in the hallway. The rider pushed the gate open slowly. Metal squealed against wood. Hooves stepped across the yard. Thump. Thump. The man dismounted. Leather coat. Dark hat. Clean boots not used to wrench dirt. Victor Hale. Isaiah had not seen him in 10 years. The man walked forward calmly. Each step slow. Measured. "Well," Hale said. His voice smooth as polished glass. "Seems the rodeo crowd found the right head after all." Isaiah stood in the doorway. The wind tugged at his coat. "What do you want, Hale?" Hale's eyes moved toward the barn. Then toward the house behind Isaiah. "I came to see the boy." Samuel's small footsteps creaked behind Isaiah. The boy stood in the hallway now. Blanket around his shoulders. Eyes wide. "Who is that?" Samuel whispered. Isaiah didn't answer. Hale noticed the child. His smile widened slightly. "So that's him." The wind pushed harder across the yard. Cold air rolled through the open door. Samuel stepped closer to Isaiah's side. His hand found Isaiah's sleeve. Gripping it tight. "What boy?" Isaiah asked flatly. Hale chuckled softly. "Don't waste time pretending." He walked closer. Boot heels crunching gravel. "I heard Mary Carter passed through town." Samuel stiffened. The locket chain slid from his pocket. Clink. Hale's eyes dropped to the sound. The metal glinted in the lantern light behind Isaiah. Hale's smile faded. Well now. He leaned slightly. Is that her locket? Samuel pulled it back instinctively. His fingers closing around it, Hale studied the boy carefully. Then looked at Isaiah again. You know why I'm here? Isaiah crossed his arms. No. Hale sighed softly. The sound carried no warmth. That boy carries a problem. Samuel pressed closer to Isaiah. Why? He whispered. Hale ignored the question. Mary Carter should have kept quiet. The wind rattled the barn doors. Bang! The horse inside shifted nervously. Isaiah's jaw tightened. You finished talking yet? Hale lifted a gloved hand calmly. No. His eyes hardened. There's a document floating around this county. Isaiah said nothing. The kind of document that might cause confusion. Samuel looked between them. What document? Hale's gaze returned to the boy. One that tells a story about your father. Samuel blinked. My father? Isaiah felt the moment tighten like wire. Hale took another step forward. Caleb Turner. Samuel's breath caught. The locket tapped softly in his hand. Clink. Hale continued. That name should have stayed buried with the river mud. Isaiah stepped forward now, blocking the doorway fully. That's far enough. Hale stopped. His smile returned. Thin. Cold. You always did get stubborn when the past came knocking. Wind swept across the yard again. Dust drifting through the lantern glow. Samuel whispered quietly. Mr. Isaiah, what does he want? Isaiah didn't look back. He wants something that isn't his. Hale tilted his head. Actually, Booker. He pointed toward Samuel. That boy might belong to me. The words hung in the cold night air. Is that true? Isaiah shook his head once. No. Hale laughed softly. You should ask Sheriff Briggs what's written on that paper. Silence followed. Heavy. Uneasy. The barn horse stomped again inside. Thump. Hale adjusted his gloves. Leather creaked. I'm giving you a chance. A chance to send the boy with me quietly. I'm not going with him. Isaiah rested a hand gently on the boy's shoulder. Steady. Firm. Hale watched the gesture. His smile disappeared completely. Think carefully, Booker. The wind blew harder now. Cold slicing through the yard. Because if that document opens in town, everything Caleb Turner left behind will belong to the man who controls this valley. Samuel's voice shook. My father left something? Hale turned toward the gate. More than the boy understands. He mounted his horse. Saddle leather groaning. But the valley has rules. He looked back once more. And those rules say nothing good grows from digging up dead men. The horse turned toward the road. Hooves thudding softly. Hale rode away into the dark prairie. Silence returned slowly. Samuel stood frozen in the doorway. The locket trembling in his hand. Clink. He looked up at Isaiah. Why does that man hate my father? Isaiah stared at the empty road. Wind brushing across the prairie. Because Caleb Turner once stopped him. Samuel swallowed. And now? Isaiah's voice dropped low. Now Hale's trying to finish what he started. Morning came gray and restless over the ranch. Wind pushed low clouds across the prairie. The barn doors thudded softly in their frames. Inside the kitchen the stove burned steady. Wood snapped in the firebox. Warm light spilled across the table. Samuel sat there with a tin cup in both hands. Steam rose slowly from the coffee Isaiah had watered down for him. The boy watched the window. Not blinking much. Outside the pasture looked empty. But the silence felt wrong. Isaiah stepped in from the yard. Cold air followed him through the door. Boots thumped against the floorboards. Samuel looked up. Did they come back? Isaiah closed the door with a dull thud. Not yet. The stove popped. The sound jumped in the quiet room. Samuel wrapped the blanket tighter around his shoulders. I dreamed about that man. Isaiah poured oats into the pot. Water hissed when it touched the hot iron. What kind of dream? Samuel stared into the steam. He was standing by the river. The spoon clinked against the pot. And he kept saying my father's name. The wind rattled the shutters again. Tap. Tap. Isaiah stirred the oats slowly. He'll say a lot of things. Samuel's voice stayed small. But he knew about Caleb Turner. Isaiah did not answer. The oats thickened. Warm. Slow. Samuel pushed the cup away. You never told me what happened to him. Isaiah set 2 bowls on the table. Ceramic touched wood. Soft. He died. Samuel's eyes dropped. By the river? Isaiah nodded once. That's the story people tell. Samuel looked back up. Is it the truth? Isaiah placed the bowl in front of him. Steam rolled upward. We'll talk about that another time. Samuel lowered his spoon. The quiet grew heavier. Then the sound came. A distant metallic knock. Clang. Clang. Isaiah froze. Samuel looked toward the door. What was that? Isaiah walked to the window. The curtain moved aside. Outside, the ranch gate swayed slightly in the wind. The chain lock hanging loose. Clang. The metal knocked against the post again. Someone had opened it during the night. Isaiah stepped outside. Cold air bit his face. Samuel followed him carefully. The ground near the gate held fresh hoof prints. Several horses. Not just one. Samuel pointed. Those weren't there yesterday. Isaiah crouched. The tracks cut deep in the dirt. Men had waited there. Watching. He stood slowly. Samuel's voice tightened. They were here? Isaiah nodded. Most of the night. The boy looked back at the house. Fear crept into his voice. What if they come again? Isaiah placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. They will. Samuel swallowed. The wind swept across the pasture again. Grass bending low. The barn horse whinnied nervously. The peaceful morning had cracked open. They walked back inside. The stove still glowed. Warm against the creeping cold. Samuel sat again at the table. But he did not eat. His spoon rested untouched in the bowl. Isaiah pulled a rifle from the rack above the door. Metal slid softly against wood. Samuel looked up quickly. You think they'll take me? Isaiah checked the chamber. Click. Victor Hale doesn't ask twice. Samuel's fingers tightened around the locket. Clink. The sound echoed in the quiet kitchen. I won't go with him. Isaiah rested the rifle beside the door. You won't. Samuel studied him carefully. You sound sure. Isaiah poured more coffee into the tin cup. Steam curled upward. He wants something tied to your father. Samuel leaned forward. What did my father do? Isaiah sat slowly across from him. Chair legs creaked. Caleb Turner stood up to hail once. Samuel waited. And? Isaiah stared into the fire. Hale was trying to claim land that didn't belong to him. Samuel frowned. The river land? Isaiah nodded. That valley feeds half this county. Samuel's voice dropped. My father stopped him? Yes. How? Isaiah rubbed his jaw. With proof. Samuel's eyes widened. What proof? Isaiah did not answer immediately. Outside, the wind struck the barn doors again. Bang. Bang. Samuel flinched. Isaiah leaned forward slightly. Something written down. Samuel glanced toward the sheriff's folded paper in his mind. The document. Isaiah nodded once. That's part of it. Samuel's heart began to pound. You mean my father left something behind? Yes. Something Hale wants. Isaiah leaned back. The chair groaned under his weight. Something powerful enough to ruin him. Samuel stared at the table. The locket chain slipped through his fingers. Clink. He opened it slowly. The photograph inside looked older now. Faded. Two young riders smiling beside the river. Samuel whispered. Mama said he was brave. Isaiah nodded. He was. Samuel closed the locket. Click. Then another sound broke the morning. A horse galloping fast down the road. Isaiah stood instantly. Boots hitting the floor hard. Samuel rushed to the window. Dust flew behind a rider racing toward the ranch. Sheriff Briggs. His hat barely holding against the wind. The horse skidded to a stop outside the door. Briggs jumped down. Boots thudding hard. He pushed the door open without knocking. Cold air rushed in again. His breath came heavy. Isaiah, he said. What happened? Samuel asked. The sheriff removed his hat. Grim. Tired. Hale's already moving. The room fell silent. Isaiah stepped closer. What kind of moving? Briggs looked directly at Samuel. He's telling the town that boy belongs to him. Samuel's face went pale. That's not true. Briggs nodded slowly. I know. The sheriff reached into his coat. The folded paper appeared again. Edges trembling slightly in his hand. Hale plans to open this in court. Samuel looked between them. Then open it now. Briggs hesitated. The wind roared outside the house. The stove crackled louder. Finally the sheriff spoke. Because once this paper opens. He looked at Isaiah. There won't be any going back. Evening lowered slowly across the prairie. Cold wind dragged long shadows over the pasture. The ranch house glowed warm against the dark. Inside the kitchen the stove burned steady. Wood cracked in the fire. Samuel sat at the table again. The locket resting in his palm. Isaiah leaned against the wall beside the door. The rifle within reach. Sheriff Briggs stood near the window. Watching the road. Silence filled the room. Not peaceful silence. Waiting silence. Samuel spoke first. If Hale tells the town I belong to him, will they believe it? Briggs rubbed his jaw slowly. Some will. The stove popped sharply. Samuel flinched. Isaiah's voice stayed calm. The truth hasn't been told yet. Samuel turned the locket over in his hand. Clink. What if they don't care about the truth? No one answered right away. Outside the wind scraped dry grass across the yard. Whisper. Whisper. Briggs moved away from the window. His boots creaked the floorboards. Hale's men are already stirring trouble in town. Isaiah looked at him. What kind of trouble? They're saying Caleb Turner stole land. Samuel's head snapped up. That's a lie. Briggs nodded. I know. Samuel's fingers tightened around the locket. My father wasn't a thief. Isaiah rested a hand on the boy's shoulder. No. Briggs exhaled slowly. But Hale owns half the businesses in this valley. Samuel looked toward the dark window. He can make people say anything. Briggs didn't disagree. The wind rattled the shutters again. Tap. Tap. Then the barn horse stomped outside. Thump. Isaiah straightened. You hear that? Briggs moved quickly to the window. He lifted the curtain. The yard lay dark beneath the moon. But something moved near the barn. A shadow. Samuel stood. What is it? Briggs lowered the curtain slowly. Two riders. Isaiah grabbed the rifle. Metal scraped softly against the wreck. Samuel's voice dropped. Hale? Maybe. They stepped outside together. Cold air rushed across the yard. The barn lantern swung lightly in the wind, its chain creaking. Creak. Creak. Two horses stood beside the barn fence, dark shapes against the pale dirt. Two men sat waiting in their saddles, faces hidden under hats. One of them spat into the dust. "Well now," the man called. "Looks like the hero came outside." Isaiah stopped a few steps from the barn. Samuel stayed close behind him. Briggs stepped to Isaiah's side. "What do you want?" The rider chuckled. "Just passing through." The second man laughed. "Thought we'd look at the famous champion's ranch." Wind swept across the yard again. The barn lantern flickered. Samuel's hand found Isaiah's coat. The rider leaned forward slightly. His voice carried slow and mean. "That the boy Hale's been talking about?" Samuel stepped closer to Isaiah. "I'm not going anywhere." The man laughed again. "That's not what we heard." Briggs took a step forward. "You've said enough." The rider shrugged. "We ain't breaking any law." The second man kicked his horse lightly. Hooves scraped dirt. "But Hale says that ranch ain't safe for the boy." Isaiah raised the rifle slightly. "Not aiming. Just enough." The lantern light glinted on the barrel. "Then Hale can come tell me himself." Silence stretched across the yard, cold and tight. One rider glanced toward the rifle, then at Briggs. "Sheriff." Briggs didn't move. "You boys should head back to town." The first rider spat again. "Fine." He pulled the reins. The horses turned slowly toward the gate. But before leaving he looked back once more, eyes cold beneath the hat brim. "Hale's patient." Samuel swallowed. The rider continued, "He'll get what belongs to him." Then the men rode away, hoofbeats fading across the prairie. Thump. 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 The wind returned, stronger now. Samuel stood frozen beside Isaiah, the locket tapping softly against his coat. Clink. "Are they coming back?" he asked quietly. Isaiah lowered the rifle. "Yes." Samuel looked toward the dark road. "Why does he want me so badly?" Briggs answered this time. "Because that paper I'm holding can destroy him." Samuel turned. "Then why not open it?" Briggs studied the boy's face. "Because once we do." He paused. "Hale won't send riders anymore." Samuel's voice trembled. "What will he send?" Isaiah looked out across the black prairie. His voice dropped low. "Himself." The barn lantern creaked in the wind again. Creak. Creak. Samuel wrapped his arms around himself, cold creeping through the night. Isaiah rested a steady hand on the boy's shoulder. "You're safe here." Samuel nodded, but his eyes stayed fixed on the road, listening, waiting. Because somewhere out there in the dark prairie, Victor Hale was coming. Dawn broke cold over the valley. Frost silvered the fence rails. The ranch yard lay quiet. Too quiet. Isaiah Booker stood beside the barn door, rifle resting across his forearms. Samuel sat on the porch step behind him, the boy's blanket wrapped tight around his shoulders. Sheriff Briggs leaned against the fence post near the gate, watching the road. No one spoke. The wind carried the sound first. Hoofbeats. Many of them. Slow. Heavy. Samuel lifted his head. "They're coming." Isaiah already knew. Dust rose along the distant road. 4 riders. Then 6. Victor Hale rode in front, tall in the saddle, black coat brushing the horse's flanks. The riders slowed at the gate. Metal chains rattled as the gate swung open. Creak. The horses stepped inside the yard. Thump. 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 Samuel stood. Isaiah lifted a hand. "Stay back." The boy obeyed. But he didn't go far. The locket tapped softly against his coat. Clink. Hale dismounted first. Leather creaked as his boots hit the ground. His men spread across the yard. Cold eyes. Hands near their holsters. Briggs stepped forward. "This is private land." Hale smiled thinly. "I'm here on business." The wind pushed across the pasture. Grass bending low. Isaiah didn't move. "You've said enough already." Hale looked at Samuel. "Long. Careful. That's the boy." Samuel felt his chest tighten. But he stepped closer to Isaiah. "I'm not going with you." Hale chuckled. "You might not have a choice." Briggs moved between them. "Victor." Hale glanced at him. "I assume you brought the paper." Briggs reached slowly into his coat. The folded document appeared. Edges trembling in the cold wind. Hale's eyes sharpened. "Good." Samuel's voice came small but clear. "What's in it?" Briggs hesitated. Isaiah looked at him. "Time to open it." The sheriff unfolded the paper. The parchment crackled. The sound cut through the silent yard. Hale watched closely. Samuel held his breath. Briggs read quietly. Then louder. Legal statement of Caleb Turner. Wind swept across the ranch. Cold. Sharp. Hale's smile faded slightly. Briggs continued. Witnessed by Sheriff Daniel Mercer. Isaiah recognized the name. The old sheriff. Dead these past 12 years. Briggs read the next line slowly. Declaration that the River Valley land belongs to the Carter family. Samuel blinked. My mama? Briggs nodded. Hale's jaw tightened. That land feeds half the valley, Briggs continued. Caleb Turner recorded proof that Victor Hale forged the claim documents. The words hung heavy. The riders shifted in their saddles. Isaiah saw it. The crack in Hale's power. Samuel stepped forward. My father stopped you. Hale's eyes turned cold. That paper means nothing. Briggs folded it again. It means everything. Wind rattled the barn door. Bang. Hale's voice hardened. You think a dead man's paper will ruin me? Isaiah stepped forward now. Boots grinding gravel. Town's going to hear it. Hale's hand moved slightly toward his holster. Samuel's breath caught. The locket clinked again. Clink. Hale looked down at the boy. Your father should have stayed quiet. Samuel's voice trembled. But he didn't. Hale's patience snapped. Enough. His hand flew to the gun. Steel flashed in the morning light. Isaiah moved faster. The rifle rose. One shot cracked across the yard. Boom. Hale's gun spun from his hand. It struck the dirt. Clatter. Horses reared. Men shouted. Dust exploded around them. Briggs drew his revolver. Hold it. Isaiah kept the rifle steady. Smoke drifting from the barrel. Hale stared at his bleeding hand. Shock flooding his face. You'd shoot me? Isaiah's voice stayed calm. You drew first. The riders hesitated. Hands hovering. None eager to move. Briggs stepped forward. You heard the law. Hale's men slowly lowered their hands. The wind swept across the yard again. Cold but steady. Samuel stood beside Isaiah now. Small. But unshaken. Hale glared at the boy. This isn't finished. Isaiah answered quietly. It is today. Briggs picked up Hale's fallen gun. The metal clicked as he emptied the chamber. You're done here, Victor. Hale pressed a cloth to his bleeding hand. His eyes burned with quiet fury. He mounted his horse with help from one rider. Before leaving he looked at Samuel again. Long. Hard. Then he turned. The riders followed him through the gate. Hoofbeats faded down the road. The yard slowly grew quiet again. Samuel looked up at Isaiah. The locket tapping softly. Clink. You protected me. Isaiah lowered the rifle. Yes. Samuel glanced toward the road. Will he come back? Isaiah looked at the folded document in Briggs's hand. No. Samuel breathed out slowly. The wind moved through the prairie grass. And the ranch felt different now. Like something heavy had finally broken. The town hall filled slowly that afternoon. Boots thudded across the wooden floor. Chairs scraped. Low voices rolled through the room like distant thunder. Outside, the wind carried dust along the street. Inside, the air felt heavy. Sheriff Briggs stood near the front table. The folded document rested beneath his hand. Isaiah Booker leaned against the wall near the door. Samuel stood beside him. The boy's fingers wrapped around the iron locket. Clink. It tapped softly against his coat button. Men from the valley gathered in rows. Ranchers. Store owners. Farmhands. All watching. All waiting. The door creaked open again. Victor Hale stepped inside. His right hand wrapped in white cloth. His coat clean. His face calm. But his eyes burned cold. The room quieted. Boots stopped moving. Chairs stopped scraping. Hale walked down the aisle slowly. His men followed behind him. They took seats near the front. Hale smiled faintly at Briggs. Sheriff. Briggs nodded once. Victor. Samuel shifted beside Isaiah. Why is he here? He whispered. Isaiah kept his voice low. Because men like him never stay away from the truth. The wind pushed through the cracks in the walls. A long hollow whistle. Briggs lifted the paper. The parchment rustled. Everyone here knows why we're gathered. A murmur spread through the room. Briggs continued. A claim has been made over the River Valley land. Hale leaned back in his chair. Relaxed. Confident. That claim, Briggs said, was challenged years ago by a man named Caleb Turner. Samuel's breath caught. The locket tapped again. Clink. Hale's eyes flicked briefly toward the boy. Then back to Briggs. The sheriff unfolded the document slowly. The paper cracked like dry leaves. He began to read. Statement recorded by Sheriff Daniel Mercer. The room grew still. Caleb Turner discovered proof that Victor Hale forged the land ownership filings. Low whispers broke across the crowd. Isaiah heard chairs creak as men leaned forward. Hale did not move. His eyes stayed fixed on Briggs. The sheriff continued. Turner presented the proof but feared it would be destroyed. Samuel whispered. What proof? Briggs lifted a small envelope from the table. Inside lay faded copies of old deeds. Stamped. Signed. Marked with Hale's forged seal. The crowd stirred louder now. Boots shifting. Men muttering. One rancher stood. That valley was never Hale's land? Briggs shook his head. It belongs to the Carter family. Samuel blinked. My mama? Briggs nodded slowly. Mary Carter. The room fell quiet again. Hale's jaw tightened. That's nonsense, he said calmly. Briggs looked directly at him. Caleb Turner placed the valley in trust for Mary Carter. Samuel's voice trembled. Why? Isaiah placed a steady hand on the boy's shoulder. Briggs answered softly. Because Caleb knew Hale would come after her. Samuel swallowed. The locket chain slipped through his fingers. Clink. Caleb said the land would pass to her child. The words settled through the room. Men turned slowly toward Samuel. The boy stood frozen beside Isaiah. Hale's voice cut through the quiet. That child has no proof. Briggs lifted another sheet. The boy's guardian was named as well. Samuel looked up. Guardian? Briggs read the final line. Should anything happen to Caleb Turner? His voice echoed through the hall. The child in the Carter land shall be protected by Isaiah Booker. Samuel stared at Isaiah. The room filled with whispers. Isaiah remained still. Briggs folded the paper carefully. The truth hung in the air. Heavy. Unavoidable. Samuel looked up slowly. "You knew my father?" Isaiah nodded. "Yes." Samuel's voice shook. "Why didn't you tell me?" The room faded around them. Isaiah spoke quietly. "Because I thought I failed him." Samuel frowned. "How?" Isaiah looked down at the locket. The night Caleb rode to file those papers. The memory pressed against his chest. "I was supposed to ride with him." Samuel held his breath. "But I didn't." The floorboards creaked under shifting boots. Isaiah continued. "Hale's men came after him by the river." Samuel's eyes widened. "Did they?" Isaiah shook his head. "Caleb got the papers delivered." Samuel whispered. "And then?" Isaiah's voice lowered. "He never made it back." Silence filled the hall. The wind howled faintly outside. Samuel looked at the locket. Then at Isaiah. "My father trusted you." Isaiah nodded once. "Yes." Samuel stepped closer. "You didn't fail him." Isaiah's jaw tightened. Samuel lifted the locket. The photograph caught the dim light. "You're still protecting what he left behind." The locket closed. Click. Across the room Victor Hale stood slowly. His chair scraped the floor. The crowd parted slightly. His voice stayed smooth. "This town believes a dead man's story?" No one answered. The ranchers looked at the papers again. At Samuel. At Isaiah. Hale's power was slipping. Like sand through his fingers. He adjusted his coat. Then turned toward the door. "This valley will regret this." His boots struck the floor as he walked out. The door slammed behind him. Bang. The room stayed quiet. Samuel looked up at Isaiah again. "You were my father's friend." Isaiah nodded. "Yes." Samuel smiled faintly. "And now you're mine." Outside the wind softened. And the truth had finally been spoken aloud. The words settled through the room. Men turned slowly toward Samuel. The boy stood frozen beside Isaiah. Hale's voice cut through the quiet. "That child has no proof." Briggs lifted another sheet. The boy's guardian was named as well. Samuel looked up. "Guardian?" Briggs read the final line. "Should anything happen to Caleb Turner." His voice echoed through the hall. "The child in the Carter land shall be protected by Isaiah Booker." Samuel stared at Isaiah. The room filled with whispers. Isaiah remained still. Briggs folded the paper carefully. The truth hung in the air. Heavy. Unavoidable. Samuel looked up slowly. "You knew my father?" Isaiah nodded. "Yes." Samuel's voice shook. "Why didn't you tell me?" The room faded around them. Isaiah spoke quietly. "Because I thought I failed him." Samuel frowned. "How?" Isaiah looked down at the locket. The night Caleb rode to file those papers. The memory pressed against his chest. "I was supposed to ride with him." Samuel held his breath. "But I didn't." The floorboards creaked under shifting boots. Isaiah continued. "Hale's men came after him by the river." Samuel's eyes widened. "Did they?" Isaiah shook his head. "Caleb got the papers delivered." Samuel whispered. "And then?" Isaiah's voice lowered. "He never made it back." Silence filled the hall. The wind howled faintly outside. Samuel looked at the locket. Then at Isaiah. "My father trusted you." Isaiah nodded once. "Yes." Samuel stepped closer. "You didn't fail him." Isaiah's jaw tightened. Samuel lifted the locket. The photograph caught the dim light. "You're still protecting what he left behind." The locket closed. Click. Across the room Victor Hale stood slowly. His chair scraped the floor. The crowd parted slightly. His voice stayed smooth. "This town believes a dead man's story?" No one answered. The ranchers looked at the papers again. At Samuel. At Isaiah. Hale's power was slipping like sand through his fingers. He adjusted his coat, then turned toward the door. "This valley will regret this." His boots struck the floor as he walked out. The door slammed behind him. Bang! The room stayed quiet. Samuel looked up at Isaiah again. "You were my father's friend." Isaiah nodded. "Yes." Samuel smiled faintly. "And now you're mine." Outside the wind softened, and the truth had finally been spoken aloud. If this story stirred a memory or two, saddle up with us again, hit subscribe and help keep these old frontier tales alive. Out here, every name, every trail, every sunset still matters. So till we meet again, friend, keep your hat tipped to the past, and your heart pointed west.